Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? Have you ever stood in your own kitchen and for just a moment could not remember what you were about to do? Have you ever been talking to someone you have known for years and their name just disappeared from your mind completely? If you said yes to any of those, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I am about to share with you could be the most important thing you hear this entire year. Most people who experience these moments tell themselves the same thing. It is just age. Everyone forgets things when they get older. It is completely normal, and sometimes that is absolutely true. Sometimes forgetting where you put your keys is just forgetting where you put your keys. But sometimes, and this is what nobody is telling seniors clearly enough, these small moments are not normal aging at all. They are early signals, signals your brain is sending you weeks, months, sometimes years before dementia becomes something a doctor can officially diagnose. And here is the single most important thing I want you to understand before we go any further. The window between these early signals and full dementia is your greatest opportunity, because dementia caught early can be slowed dramatically. In some cases, certain causes can be partially reversed. The right interventions at the right time can give a person years of quality life that they would otherwise lose. But dementia ignored, dementia mistaken for normal aging for 2 or 3 years, gives it time to cause damage that cannot be undone, damage that steals not just memory, but personality, independence, and dignity. So today I am going to walk you through 7 specific signs. Not the obvious ones you already know about. Not the severe memory loss that everyone associates with the late stages of dementia. The early ones, the subtle ones, the ones that look so much like ordinary life that most seniors dismiss them completely and sometimes dismiss them for years. Each one of these signs on its own may mean very little, but together, in a pattern, over time, they are the language your brain uses to ask for help before it is too late to give it. Stay with me until sign number 5, because that one surprises almost every senior I have ever spoken to. Most people have never heard of it, and it is one of the most consistent early warning indicators that doctors and researchers look for today. Sign number 1 is getting lost or confused in familiar places. I am not talking about getting lost in a new city or struggling to navigate somewhere you have never been before. That is completely normal for anyone at any age. I am talking about something very different and very specific, getting confused or disoriented in places you know extremely well. Your own neighborhood, the route to your local shop that you have driven or walked 100 times, the layout of your own home when you wake up in the middle of the night. Here is what is happening inside the brain when this occurs, and why it matters so much. Your brain has a region called the hippocampus. The hippocampus has 2 primary responsibilities. It forms new memories and it navigates space. It is the brain's internal map maker, and it is one of the very first regions that dementia begins to affect, often years before any doctor can confirm a diagnosis. When the hippocampus starts losing cells and connections, the brain's internal maps begin to blur. A person might drive to the supermarket they have visited every single week for 15 years and suddenly feel uncertain about which turn to take. They might wake up in the night and for a few long, disorienting seconds not know which direction the bathroom is in their own home. They might walk through streets they have known for decades and feel a strange, unsettling unfamiliarity, like something about the place is slightly wrong, even though nothing has changed. If this has happened to you even once or twice in the last several months, I want you to take it seriously. Write it down with the date it happened. Note how long the confusion lasted and whether it is happening more frequently over time. One completely isolated incident may mean very little. A pattern, even a quiet and subtle pattern, is something worth bringing to your doctor with your written record in hand. Sign number 2 is struggling to find words in the middle of sentences more than before. Everyone occasionally loses a word. You are talking, and the word you want is just slightly out of reach for a moment. You pause. You say it is on the tip of my tongue, and a few seconds later it comes back and you move on. That happens to everyone regardless of age, and it means nothing on its own. What I am describing is something different in quality and in frequency. It is a pattern of losing words mid-sentence that is noticeably more common than it was 1 or 2 years ago. substituting words with similar but wrong ones without fully realizing it, saying the thing you use to brush your teeth instead of simply saying toothbrush, referring to your son-in-law as your daughter's husband because his name simply would not arrive when you reached for it, stopping completely in the middle of a sentence with a look of genuine lost confusion on your face, not just a brief pause but a real gap where the word simply does not come back at all. Language and word retrieval live primarily in a region of the brain called the temporal lobe, and the temporal lobe is another area that early dementia affects in significant and measurable ways. When connections in this region begin to weaken, the brain's ability to retrieve specific words on demand starts to become unreliable. The words are still stored somewhere in the vast network of the brain, but the pathway to retrieve them becomes damaged. It is like knowing something is in a drawer, but the drawer keeps sticking. The most important question to ask yourself honestly is not whether you ever forget a word. The question is whether this is happening more often now than it did a year or two ago. And equally important, have the people who talk with you regularly, your family, your close friends, started gently finishing your sentences for you more than they used to. If they have noticed it, and you have noticed it, and it is getting more frequent, rather than staying the same, that pattern deserves medical attention. Sign number 3 is personality or mood changes that feel out of character. This sign is often the hardest for families to connect to dementia because it looks so convincingly like depression or anxiety or stress, or simply the natural process of becoming more private and set in your ways as you age. A man who was warm, sociable, and genuinely enjoyed people his entire life starts strongly preferring to stay at home alone and becomes distressed when social plans are made. A woman who was patient and consistently gentle with her family starts becoming irritable and sharp over small things that never bothered her in 40 years of marriage. Someone who was always calm and trusting starts developing episodes of sudden, unexplained anxiety or suspicion toward people they have known and loved for decades. A person who always loved hosting family gatherings starts making excuses to cancel them and becomes visibly overwhelmed when they cannot avoid them. What is happening in the brain during these early personality changes is deeply significant. The frontal lobe, the part of your brain responsible for regulating emotions, managing impulses, maintaining social awareness, and controlling behavior, is one of the regions that dementia affects early and consistently. When the frontal lobe begins losing connectivity, the brain's ability to regulate mood and personality starts to weaken in ways the person themselves often cannot perceive. Emotions that were previously managed naturally and automatically start breaking through in inappropriate or uncharacteristic ways. Social situations that were once completely comfortable become genuinely exhausting and overwhelming because the brain is now working significantly harder than before just to keep up with the demands of conversation and human interaction. The person experiencing these changes often feels completely justified in their new behaviors. They have explanations for everything. They do not see the pattern from the inside the way their family sees it from the outside. If you or someone very close to you has noticed a genuine shift in personality over the past 1 to 2 years, not just a difficult period or a response to a specific stressful event, but a real and lasting change in who this person fundamentally seems to be, please do not allow it to be explained away as just getting older. Tell me in the comments right now, have you noticed any of these first 3 signs in yourself or in someone you love? Just write yes or no. You do not need to share any details. I just want to know this is reaching the people who need it most. Sign number 4 is difficulty completing tasks that used to be completely automatic. Think carefully about the things you do every day without consciously thinking about them. Making your morning tea or coffee exactly the way you like it. Every step in the right order without ever thinking about the steps. Following a recipe you have made dozens of times without needing to look at the instructions. Paying a bill online or managing your bank account the way you have always done it. Setting up your television or adjusting your phone settings. Balancing your monthly budget the way you have managed it for years and years. These are called procedural memories and automatic sequences. They are embedded so deeply in your brain from years and years of repetition that you perform them almost entirely without conscious thought. Your hands and your mind simply know what comes next. When dementia begins affecting the brain's deeper memory networks, these automatic sequences start to break down in ways that feel genuinely confusing and distressing to the person experiencing them. Suddenly, the steps of something familiar feel unfamiliar. You find yourself stopping halfway through something you have done 1,000 times and genuinely not knowing what comes next. You follow a recipe you know from memory and realize you have added the same ingredient twice because you lost track of where you were in the process. You sit down to pay a bill you have paid the same way every month for 10 years, and the steps suddenly feel uncertain and unclear. The critical distinction here is between struggling with something new and struggling with something you have done many times before. Struggling to learn a new device or a new process is completely normal at any age and means nothing concerning. But struggling with tasks that your brain and hands use to perform automatically without thought, that is a meaningful signal. And if you find yourself avoiding these tasks without consciously deciding to, making excuses not to cook, letting bills pile up, stopping activities that used to be routine, pay attention to that avoidance because the brain uses avoidance to hide its own struggles, even from the person it belongs to. Sign number 5 is a change in the sense of smell. I told you this one would surprise you, and I want to explain it carefully because it is supported by some of the most consistent and compelling research in early dementia detection published in the last decade. Your sense of smell is processed by a small structure at the very front of your brain called the olfactory bulb, and the olfactory bulb has a direct and uniquely close connection to the hippocampus and to the areas of the brain that dementia affects earliest. Researchers have discovered that changes in how the brain processes smell often begin 7 to 10 years before any memory symptoms appear. 7 to 10 years before a person forgets a name or gets lost on a familiar street, the brain may already be showing changes in how it handles smell. What does this actually look like in everyday life? Foods that used to smell wonderful and rich start smelling weaker or different in a way that is hard to describe. You walk past a bakery that always made you stop and breathe deeply, and now you barely notice it. Your morning coffee smells less strong and less appealing than it used to. You find yourself automatically adding more salt or more spice to food because the flavors and smells seem less intense and satisfying than they once were. Or on the other side of this sign, you occasionally smell things that nobody else around you can smell. A faint burning smell with no source. A sweet or chemical smell that appears and disappears. Smells that come from nowhere and belong to nothing in the room. None of these experiences alone confirms anything concerning. But paired with other signs on this list, a significant and noticeable change in your sense of smell is something your doctor genuinely needs to know about. There are now simple, standardized smell tests that doctors use as part of early cognitive screening. They take just a few minutes, and they can provide genuinely useful information. If your sense of smell has changed noticeably in the last 1 to 2 years, especially if it has been a gradual and progressive change, please mention it specifically at your next medical appointment. Sign number 6 is poor judgment and decision-making that feels out of character. This is one that the people around a senior often notice clearly and painfully before the senior notices it themselves. And it is one of the most important signs on this list because it carries real and immediate safety implications. A person who was always financially careful and appropriately skeptical suddenly sends a significant amount of money to a stranger after receiving a convincing phone call or email. Someone who always dressed practically and appropriately for the weather walks outside on a cold morning without a coat and seems genuinely puzzled when their family expresses concern. A person who was always safety conscious in the kitchen starts leaving the stove on after cooking or forgetting it entirely. Someone who was always a careful and responsible driver starts making decisions behind the wheel that frighten the passengers with them. Good judgment is not a simple single brain function. It requires multiple regions of the brain working together, taking in information, weighing potential consequences, considering alternatives, and selecting the safest or most appropriate response. When the frontal lobe and its connections begin to deteriorate, this complex process breaks down quietly and invisibly. The person continues to feel confident in their decisions. They cannot perceive from the inside that their judgment has changed. They have reasons for everything they do. They simply cannot see what the people who love them are watching with growing concern. If you have noticed a pattern of decisions in yourself or in someone close to you that seem genuinely out of character, not one isolated mistake but a pattern of judgment that seems different from what you know this person to be, please take it seriously and act on it. This particular sign in certain situations requires urgent attention because the consequences of poor judgment can be immediate and serious. Sign number 7 is withdrawing from hobbies and activities that were once deeply loved. This is perhaps the quietest sign on this entire list, and it is the one most consistently dismissed as depression or changing interests or simply slowing down with age. A woman who knitted or sewed every single evening for 30 years quietly stops, not because she consciously decided she no longer enjoys it, but because the pattern she always knew now seems confusing, and she does not want to face or admit that she can no longer follow it the way she once did without effort. A man who played chess or cards with friends every week begins finding reasons not to go, not because he does not want to see his friends, but because keeping track of the game has become genuinely overwhelming and exhausting in a way he cannot explain to anyone, including himself. Someone who loved cooking elaborate and impressive meals for family gatherings starts suggesting that everyone just order food because managing multiple steps simultaneously has become too difficult and disorienting. The brain, when it is struggling, compensates in a very specific and consistent way. It withdraws from complexity. It avoids situations and activities that expose the struggle to other people. It gravitates naturally towards simpler, quieter, less demanding ways of spending time. And it does all of this quietly, with perfectly reasonable sounding excuses, so that neither the person experiencing it nor the family around them realizes what is actually driving the withdrawal until enough time has passed to see the full pattern clearly. If a hobby or an activity that someone loved genuinely and deeply for years or even decades has simply and quietly faded away without a clear physical reason, without an injury, without a conscious decision to stop, without any stated loss of interest, that quiet disappearance deserves real and honest attention. Let me tell you about a man I will call George. George was 67 years old. He had been a school teacher for 35 years. He was sharp, articulate, organized, and deeply respected by everyone who knew him. His wife adored him. His former students remembered him as one of the best teachers they ever had. About 2 years before anyone sought professional help, his wife began noticing things she could not quite put into words. He occasionally seemed confused driving home from their church, a route he had driven every single Sunday for 22 years. He started finding reasons to avoid their weekly dinner with close friends they had known for decades, always with an explanation that sounded perfectly reasonable. He quietly stopped doing the crossword puzzle he had done every single morning since retiring, leaving the newspaper folded on the table unopened. His warmth was still there, but something in his personality had shifted in a way she felt but could not describe to anyone. He was adding more salt to every meal and commenting several times a week that food did not taste as strong as it used to. Separately, each of these things seemed explainable. Together over 2 years, they formed a clear and consistent pattern. His wife finally wrote everything down with dates and brought it to their doctor. A thorough cognitive evaluation confirmed early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Because it was identified at this early stage, George was able to start medication that research shows can meaningfully slow progression. His family had time to plan together, while George was still fully able to participate in those conversations and decisions. He had time to express his wishes, to be heard, to remain in control of his own story for longer than he would have been had these signs been dismissed for another year or two. That is why this video exists, not to frighten you, not to make you anxious about every moment of forgetfulness, but to give you the information that gives you and the people you love the best possible chance at the best possible outcome. Here is what I want you to do with everything you just heard. Do not panic over a single incident. One forgotten word, one moment of confusion, one difficult mood, one skipped evening of a hobby means nothing in isolation. What matters is patterns, changes from what has always been normal for this specific person. Things that are happening more often than they used to, or things that have quietly disappeared when they were once consistent. Write down what you have noticed with dates attached. Be honest with yourself and gently honest with your family, and make an appointment with your doctor specifically to discuss memory and brain health. Tell them you want a cognitive baseline assessment. It is a simple conversation-based test that takes about 15 minutes, and it gives your doctor something to measure against in future appointments. That baseline is one of the most valuable things you can have documented in your medical records. Early is everything with dementia. Not because an early diagnosis is a gift, because it is not, but because time is. Time to slow what can be slowed. Time to protect what can still be protected. Time to make decisions while you are still fully able to make them. Time to have the conversations that matter most with the people who matter most to you. This video is for education only. Please talk to your doctor if you or someone you love is experiencing any of the signs we discussed today. A proper medical evaluation is the only way to understand what is actually happening and what options are available. If this video reached you at the right moment, please share it with your family today. Not just the seniors in your life, but their children and their partners too. Because often it is the people closest to a senior who notice these signs first, and they need to know what they are looking at and what to do with what they are seeing. And if you want to know the specific foods that research shows can protect the aging brain, reduce inflammation, and actively lower the risk of dementia, I made a video covering all of them with the science explained in plain, simple language. Watch that one next. I will see you there.